Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Write Pack. Welcome back to Write Pack Radio. This is your host and the show's producer, David Allen Lucas. This is our final episode of the first season, and the last in this 3-part series on Meet the Write Pack. A year ago, if you had asked me if I believed that we would be going into a second season with the number of fans and followers that we've had, I probably would have called you a liar, to be honest with you. I am excited that we have reached out to so many authors out there, or so many new writers and agents and so forth with our topics. And I promise you, second season is going to just keep getting better. In this episode, the last episode of Meet the Write Pack, we will hear from the beautiful and talented Jennifer Stolzer. We will hear from the newest member of our pack, Meredith Tate. And we will hear from yours truly. In next season, we're going to have a brand new theme song. As you know, we've had this one theme song all season, and it's time to change it. And hopefully you like it. It's going to be a little different in taste, a little more ragtime-ish, which fits St. Louis. And we will be going into topics that still affect the industry of writing and all its possibilities. So stay tuned.
Hello, this is Kathleen Kayembe and David Lucas. We are here with Jennifer Stolzer, a member of Write Pack Radio, to help the listeners get to know her a little bit. Hi, Jen.
Hi.
So, our first question that we've been starting out with is, who is Jennifer Stolzer, the writer?
I don't know, it's hard to define who you are. I don't feel like I know myself very well.
5 sentences or less.
5 sentences or less.
No, not actually.
Jennifer Stolzer, the writer. I love speculative stuff, so I guess I'm an adventurer, I suppose. I like going new places and learning new things in writing. I'm also pretty hopeful. I like finding hope places. I'm not much of a drama person, although drama is introduced into everything. Maybe that's the reason why I'm also an illustrator and do a lot of kid stuff. It's because I like having something uplifting at the end of the day.
So, what genres do you write in then? You've mentioned some adventure and mentioned drama, but what do you like to write?
I write spec. I write fantasy and sci-fi and that kind of stuff. The closest to a contemporary novel is kind of the ghost story I'm writing right now, because it happens to take place in the real world. Mm-hmm. But even then, it's about ghosts and being ghosts and being dead. Mm-hmm. So I like exploring different stuff that way. I really love making brand new worlds to live in. So
is that part of what attracts you to those genres, the spec fic?
Yeah, it's a lot of... I don't have a lot of patience for what you consider a contemporary drama stuff.
How do you mean?
Like high school, who's going to prom with who. If I don't get an A on my science project, I'll be sad. A lot of topic stuff, like I enjoyed The Fault in Our Stars, but probably not as much as some other people I know. Other people really got into it, but I enjoyed it for like the interesting aspect of learning what life is like from a cancer kid perspective. I wasn't in it for the romance so much. Like, the drama, to me, was living life in the shoes of somebody else, as opposed to the crazy, who's dating who kind of thing. I don't know. I think I've talked myself into a corner.
Well, does that make it more difficult for reading YA? Because you introduced me to Booze Your Own Adventure, which is a hilarious web series.
They're great, yeah. I think they agree with me a lot.
So, how does reading YA then fit into this trend of YA going toward teenage romance.
I don't like teenage romance. I tend to read those out of some sort of duty to being aware of my genre, but I didn't read Twilight. I didn't enjoy the aspects of Hunger Games that was which boy is she gonna pick. I gravitate more toward things that are like fantasy. Like Hunger Games is great because it's got this awesome dystopian world that I could explore. That was the fun part. Haymitch was my favorite character in Hunger Games because he was interesting to learn about. He represents what the world has done to the people that live in the world, and that's the interesting, cool part that I want to explore.
The world's effect on its people. Mm-hmm. You've mentioned some, I guess game terms would be sandbox. You mentioned playing around in the sandbox a bit with these worlds. You should probably explain sandboxing because I will do a terrible job.
Well, sandbox in the game worlds, you mentioned game worlds. And when you're playing a video game, if there's a sandbox element to it, it means there's a really broad, wide world, game world that your character can explore in that he isn't necessarily railroaded into what he has to do next. He may have specific tasks he has to complete to finish his quest or to finish the storyline of the game, but there's a certain aspect that is exploration, that it's just like go wherever, go do stuff, discover things, play around in the world we've built for you. Good examples of sandbox games like Skyrim is a fantasy sandbox style. It's got a story to it, but half of the story is also go explore this world we've set for you. Or like the Grand Theft Auto games, there is a plot in Grand Theft Auto. You can complete the plot, or you could create terror and get a new haircut and run around for hours and hours and hours and make no quote-unquote progress, but have fun anyway.
I never knew that had a plot. So it sounds then like something you enjoy about fiction, the books that you read, are the worlds and the adventure that happens within them. Is that accurate? Yeah,
I mean, I think it's necessary for stuff I enjoy. I'm not going to say that I don't enjoy interpersonal relationships, because I do. I specifically like writing characters' relationships with each other, but they're going to have to be done really well for me to buy them, because I'm really critical and skeptical, and kind of a cardboardy romance is not something that can turn my interest. A story about two siblings standing up for each other in the face of a harsh world, that's interesting. The story of a parent and a child, and how one grows up to turn into the other or to rebel against the other, that's interesting. For serious romance that involves all of the ups and downs of being in a close personal relationship with another person, that's interesting. I like a really well-written YA, I guess. Any book, because I'm not going to say that YA is the only genre that suffers from sort of cliche cardboard characterization. It's just what I write in.
So, who are some of your literary heroes? What are some of your favorite YA books that you've read lately? And by lately, I mean period, because I think growing up books also count because they're hugely influential.
Yes. Some of my favorite writers, well, recently, over summer, I got really into Derek Landy's Skullduggery Pleasant series. Super creative, really interesting take on a lot of old sort of standbys of the fantasy world, vampires and magic, and thought of it just a little bit differently and presented it with a colorful cast of characters that have a whole bunch of different relationships with each other. It was really interesting. Still haven't finished the series. I intend to, but I still haven't.
I thought your reason for not finishing it ties in well with something you've said that you like about reading.
What, that it's going to break my heart? Yeah, don't look on the internet. It'll spoil you for the outcome of the next book you're reading. It sucks.
More about hope. You mentioned hope.
Yes, it gets hopeless. But I haven't finished it yet. I don't know what's going to end, how it's going to end. I know that Tumblr cried a lot when the last book came out. So maybe that's keeping me from jumping right on into it. A lot of it also has to do with all the other books that I need to read. I can justify reading 7 Skullduggery Pleasant books at a go, but at some point I'm going to have to read the books I borrowed from other people.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you, and you were telling me about your literary heroes and the books that you liked reading. So
Derek Landy, he did a good job. Look him up. Around on this end, the American end of the world, he's kind of hard to locate, but I found him in the library, so you can look up Derek Landy in the Skullduggery Pleasant series. I think my literary idol, I suppose, would definitely be Neil Gaiman, because he's everything I want to be. He's creative. He creates his own worlds. He does what he wants. He's got the respect and clout in the industry to do whatever he wants to do. He wants to do a comic book, do a comic book. He wants to do a middle grade, do a middle grade. He wants to write for TV, writes for TV. You know, he's got so many ideas, and he gets to play with every single toy that he's ever wanted to touch. And that's really great. Also, he has 2 German Shepherds.
He also just seems like a really cool, down-to-earth person.
That too. I mean, I've heard him talk. I'm sure a lot of people have heard some of his speeches. I love his episode of Wait, Don't Tell Me. He's great.
I've seen that. Note to self. But go on.
Oh, well, there's nothing like sticking Neil Gaiman on a throne and then asking him questions he knows nothing about. Wait, Don't Tell Me is an NPR show, and they're pretty fun. They're good fun. They represent a lot of me. They make jokes on about current events. They present sometimes really awful current events, but find a way to sort of find humor in it. Even if it is kind of dark, you know, we all kind of grimace as well humor.
I do want to talk a little bit about your sense of humor before we go on to other more writing-specific things. Well, overtly writing-specific things. Your sense of humor comes out a lot in how you discuss plots and things that you've seen. And I wanted to know a little bit about how that came about. Like, how did you get so funny, yet so good at deconstructing things?
I don't know. I'm glad you think I'm funny and not annoying.
I love watching movies with you so much.
I don't know. I think I just, I'm going to attribute a lot of that to Mystery Science Theater 3000. I was trained in the art of riffing from an early age. The school of riffing. I actually think Mystery Science Theater, if I was going to have someday I want to have a creative writing class, or, you know, I teach at a community college or whatever, I'm going to give people a Mystery Science Theater episode that they have to watch both the movie and the movie with the riffs and see how, you know, where you have to research where all the riffs come from. It's a very clever way of comedy and deconstruction as well, highlighting flaws or perceived flaws. Sometimes the flaws are legitimate. Sometimes they're just, you know, if the movie isn't necessarily too horribly terrible, like it's just bland, then you got to make, you know, force humor in. But a lot of the time, the humor that they find is in, you know, a really bad acting job. If someone's acting really horribly, they make a highlight of it, and that's the funny part. The funny part is they're pointing out this thing that we all agree, you know, it's so true, that's why it's funny. That kind of stuff. It's good stuff. I started watching Mystery Science Theater and shows like that in elementary school. So I've been well trained in the riff tracks. Thanks, dudes.
The art of riff.
The art of riff. It makes me insufferable to watch films with. I have been told to shut up before.
I have a question about publication.
Okay.
And what are some of the pains you've faced being a writer and going through publication process? Talk about those, because I know you've had a few different experiences from a writing perspective and from an illustrator perspective.
Yeah. I'm pretty... I fight really hard to stay hopeful about publishing. To be perfectly honest, I feel like the industry is stacked against the writer. I know a lot of people tell me that it isn't, but it feels like it is. There's a whole lot of hurdles to jump through, and trying to get my own book published, it seems like the rules keep changing out from underneath me. It's like, I think I'm set, I get it ready to go, and I find out I've been doing something wrong the whole time. And then I have to go in and change it. And it's good to learn and grow, and I'm not saying that, you know, I should have gotten it right the first time, because I'm not superhuman. But it's just frustrating, you know, to think you're there and then you're not there. And to keep working and then get a no. And to get your best first chance and then have it fall through. It's trying. It's hard to stay positive and keep that hopefulness that I pretend to kind of like.
How do you persevere through all that?
Crying.
Sorry, I'm gonna die.
You gotta let yourself be sad about things, but you can't stay sad. Let yourself be sad, feel those emotions, those are real emotions. You have to feel sad when you are disappointed. But don't let the disappointment overpower you. Make a conscious effort to send another query or to learn from your mistakes or whatever, or try to make it right if you can make it right. A lot of the instances in publishing, you can't make it right because you sent a letter to this one entity on the internet and they said no. You can't write back and say, well, what do I got to do to make it better? Because then they'll go, well, you go on my blacklist and you don't get to ever query to me again because obviously you're immature. I have a lot of, like, well, right there. There's a scenario. I invented a scenario that I feel like the publishing industry is like. I don't know if that's the truth or not, but that's how I feel. I've got a very David and Goliath kind of thing. I'm looking forward to knocking that giant down, but I don't know when that's going to happen or how much is going to be divine intervention.
So you have published some things. You've published some children's books with other people.
Yes.
And with yourself.
Yes, I did do myself.
So what have some problems been that you've run into, some unexpected things that happened with the success of doing those?
Well,
projects?
I've only published self-publishing. Like, I've done CreateSpace mostly. I've worked in Lulu, which is another print on-demand service, and a little bit of other places with different rules and things. Everything's got its own rules. The issue that I found with self-publishing is that you find a lot of people who want to support you and tell you to, it's like, oh, keep going, you'll do a really good job. And you need those people. But in the end, everyone has only a finite amount of money they're willing to spend. And they can say, oh, your book is really cute, I really love it, but then they don't buy a copy because do they really need a copy? They don't need a copy. And they can be a fan of you as an artist or you as a writer and not have money to spend on everything you ever put out. And I understand that too. I don't demand my entire group of friends and family to run out and throw hundreds of dollars at me just because I ask for it. But you have to work really hard to reach people outside of that sphere. And you only sell as many books as the, kernels of effort you put in. You have to reach a reader. You have to reach readers you've never met before. You have to take time and organize yourself. And, myself, I have a hard time prioritizing my own stuff over my client work. Because I take on clients and I illustrate books for clients, and those people feel more important to me because they're relying on me. So I have a hard time pushing Dog Park and selling Dog Park. Sometimes even remembering Dog Park exists. Even though it's an important part of my career to have a book put out, by myself, it's I forget it's there because I'm too busy worrying about everybody else's thing. And I'm not like marketing their thing either. I'm just the illustrator. So it's like I have to finish my task. I have to get my money for that task and then find a new task. I think I've wandered away from the question, but trials of publishing, it's hard to self-publish because you are the only one shouldering any of the burden. And you can ask for help from other people, and they will give you advice, but they're not going to be like, oh, and also here is all of the people who are ever going to buy your book, just go get them to buy it.
There's a list. It is like Santa's.
Exactly. It's like, it's not going to just happen because there's a book out. Just because you published a book doesn't mean that everyone's going to buy it. You have to make it desirable, and you have to build an audience, and you have to push it just as hard as someone who's using an entire staff of publishing people by yourself.
What advice would you give to other writers who are getting into writing or who maybe are wanting to go into illustrating? What would you say to them?
I'd say keep doing it, for one, because you'll never get better if you don't draw or write, both things. I draw a picture every day without fail, and it's not because, I have to sit down and draw my picture, and same thing for writing. A lot of people say you have to sit down and write for this amount of time in this day. If that works for you, that's fine. That doesn't work with my life. My life tends to happen on the fly. There's one thing about being freelance is that things just appear on my schedule that I'm like, oh, right, I have to do that. Or someone calls me and asks if we can get a meeting, or I find an opportunity to do this thing. I don't have time to sit down and say, this is my 30 minutes of writing time, because that 30 minutes of writing time might be the only time that day that I can go get groceries.
So how do you advise people who do have a more wildly fluctuating schedule? How do you advise that they get in that time?
Well, I keep a journal with me. This is it.
For those who can't see, she's poking at a flower-covered journal.
I have I keep a journal with me everywhere I go, and I keep a sketchbook with me everywhere I go. And if I'm waiting in line at the grocery store, maybe I'll write something. If I'm parked at a stoplight, maybe I might write something. Never when the car's rolling, though. But if you're waiting in a waiting room, you can write something. You can draw something. Firsthand, Kathleen, I draw through everything. If I can't write because I'm paying attention to someone else, then the pencil comes out and I draw something. It's just the way my brain works. I'm a horrible multitasker. I don't consider that too much of an asset. Mm-hmm. It can be at times, but it makes it hard to focus on one thing. So I draw lots of pictures while I'm watching television, because television, they tell you, and I've been trained well, is a brain-rotting experience. So I gotta keep my brain going. Don't... Find the time wherever you are at. See if you can work it into what your life already does. Because if you have to abandon part of your life in order to get your writing or your drawing in, then you're gonna favor the thing that you would rather be doing. I'm not gonna watch my favorite show anymore. I'm going to draw a picture. How long until you go back to watching your favorite show? It's not gonna be long because you're gonna miss it. It's something you enjoy and you want to do. Now, maybe if you're an artist and you're watching your favorite show, you're like, well, while I'm watching this show, I'm going to draw a picture of the outfit that Zooey Deschanel is wearing today. That's something that you can just kind of do and get your lines practiced, because it's all muscle memory and you need to practice it in order to get better. You need to observe life in order to get better.
That sounds like good advice for writers and illustrators both. Just how to bring a journal with you everywhere and fit writing and fit your art into the crevices of your life, because there are going to be moments when you have time.
And the journal is not my novel. I'm not writing my novel in my journal. I'm writing things. Mm-hmm. This is what I did today. This is how I feel right now. This is an idea I had. Just whatever. Just write it. And it's, I've been told before, I've read from my journal at open mic before, and I've been told that they really like the voice of that. Mm-hmm. That my listeners like the voice of my journal writings. That's because I'm just talking into the book. It's the same as if I'm talking to you right now. I even put the likes, it's like, okay. I write that into the journal because it's just a stream of consciousness, and that's where I can store some of my brain. It's my pensieve. I can take ideas out of my head and put them in the book, and then they're not gone. But I can stop thinking about them for a little while.
Trust your voice, trust yourself, trust the Force, Luke. Well, Jen, it's been really fun interviewing you. Thank you so much for coming and letting us do this.
Well, thank you for having these.
And now we're going to talk with Meredith Tate. Hey, Meredith. Okay,
Hey, David.
You are one of our newest members of the Right Pack. You are, in fact, a transplant to St. Louis. Where'd you come from?
I came from Concord, New Hampshire, and actually more recently Boston, Mass. On the Northeast, go Sox. It's kind of what I'm.
St. Louis will try to forgive you for the Go Sox. So, what kind of writer are you? I know you write, you've got a book coming out, but I don't think that's your only kind of style you write.
It's true. I guess I'm a pretty diverse writer in that I'm having a really hard time branding myself. My book that's coming out is a speculative romance. It's new adult. Then the book I just finished is a pretty dark YA sci-fi, and then my current work in progress is a pretty fluffy YA fantasy. So I'm kind of all over the place.
So with that, and you're like me, you like to write different genres. Yay! I hate being pigeonholed, but
me too.
With all that's going on in writing, we've got a whole entire new world of writing. You've got critics out there who will jump on anything. Mm-hmm. You've got the worries about trying to get published, trying to get the next deal, trying to sell your book. Being your own marketing rep, technically, even if the book house who published you gives you marketing abilities as well, why be a writer nowadays?
I guess to me, I would say, why not be a writer? I never really saw myself doing a whole lot of anything else. It just always, I had to sit down and put words on the page. And I mean, I've got a lot of stuff written that nobody will ever or should ever see, but that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy doing it. And just putting the words on the page and coming up with stories and putting the characters that are talking in my head and giving them life on the page. I just like it. It's fun.
Okay. So, what was some of your biggest obstacles to getting to writing? Have you ever had any big obstacles to writing or to being published?
Well, to being published, I think a big obstacle for me is the market, and I think that's because I love writing dystopian, and anyone who's in the publishing industry knows now that that's a very hard sell, sadly. And an obstacle to writing, I would say, is just kind of forcing yourself to do it. It's so easy to get distracted. Social media, Twitter, Facebook, just kind of stuff going on. It's hard to make the time kind of during the day. It's like, oh, I have all these errands to do. I have to work. I have to do all this stuff. It's just kind of forcing yourself to sit down and do it, for me, has been a challenge.
Okay, and then what about the other side of the coin? We're always warned about the problems of failure and how to face failure in this industry. Because you get rejections left, right, and upside down if you're really trying.
Yep, I've been getting some this week. So.
There you go. So what about the problems of success? Nobody really talks about that. What's some of your problems of success that you've had and that you're trying to overcome or that you have overcome?
So I think for me, one of my problems with success is I did get a book deal. My book is coming out in March, and as that gets closer, I think I'm getting a little stressed out and nervous thinking about people reading it. Am I going to get a lot of one-star reviews? Are my friends and family going to judge me based on kind of a more adult book? Are they going to judge me based on the content? Am I going to log on to Amazon and just see my work torn apart and that stuff? I don't know if I'm ready for that, like emotionally. And I think that as an author, I think that's hard to deal with. So I guess for me, that would be my answer.
Okay. Who are some of your literary heroes? Who's inspired you as a writer?
So I actually have two. The first one I'm going to say is my mother. She unfortunately passed away in 2010, but she was a picture book writer and illustrator. And I grew up with her books and thinking that, oh, my mom is a writer, so I want to be one too. So she always read my stories and stuff, so that she was a huge influence for me. And then, of course, and I know this is what everybody says, but I'm going to add to the group of everybody and say that J.K. Rowling is one of my literary heroes. First of all, obviously I love Harry Potter, my favorite books ever. And second of all is that she did it out of nothing. She went from being a single mother on welfare, essentially just writing these stories, and now she's a billionaire, one of the richest people in the world, so successful, so influential. And I guess it's kind of one of those, well, if she can do it from her position, then I mean, there's no reason why I can't finish writing my little manuscript here. So I guess she's another big literary hero of mine.
And what advice could you give to new writers or writers who are been published before but are still trying to figure out if they want to stay in this game or not?
I would say just keep going. Just kind of do it for you. Don't do it to get published. Don't do it for anyone else. You can worry about that later. Just worry about writing the story that's in your head and just get it down. And remember, there's no pressure. You never have to show it to anyone or submit it if you don't want to, but just keep doing it for you if that's something that you enjoy.
Thank you. And now, Kathleen KMB, the co-host extraordinaire, gets to torture her favorite host on Right Pack Radio. No. This is the last of the interviews. Thank you for everybody who has been following along. And Kathleen gets to interview the one person you haven't heard from, or maybe you hear from too much, and that is myself.
The one person who started it all.
Yes. Well, actually, no, you're the one who started it all. I'm the one who took your idea and went to the concept of doing an internet radio. But you're the one who started the write-ins that started the conversations that led to this. It's actually been an interesting evolution.
I would like to talk about the mastermind of the radio show, however, because he's a fascinating person. We are here
He's around?
Where'd he go? No, we are here with David Allen Lucas, host of Right Pack Radio, writer extraordinaire, and very cool person.
Well, thank you.
And on that cool person note, I'd like to ask something I asked Brad as well. Why do you use Allen in the middle of David and Lucas?
Well, there's two reasons. Not only because, well, actually three reasons. Of course, one is my real name, but the other two is, the first reason why I threw Allen in there is, David Lucas is a common enough name, admittedly. But when I went out and searched for who was using my name, especially in publications and so forth, I found a comedian using my name as a pen name. I'm like, really? You couldn't have come up with a different pen name? Oh, well. So I threw in, after thinking about it, I threw in Alan. It's not. I would have never have liked my parents to have named me Alan David. I don't like Al, but whatever. I picture the old Happy Days, very heavy set, short order cook when you say Al. So, but I'm named after my dad, which obviously he was David Allen Lucas Sr. I'm Roman numeral 2.
Oh my gosh.
But,
I did not know that part.
But here's the fun part. Here's the literary part. He was named, and thus I am named, after two of my grandmother's favorite characters from a Robert Louis Stevenson novel, David and Alan from Kidnapped.
Oh my gosh.
So I was like, I definitely loved having both those names be able to throw in, because it's a literary salute to not only Robert Louis Stevenson, who is a author I like and love, actually, but my grandmother, Goldie Lucas, was a published author here in St. Louis, usually publishing back in the days when newspapers published short stories and stuff like that. She published poetry and short stories in the Post-Dispatch, I believe, definitely in some of the St. Louis newspapers.
So you are literally a character from a line of literary lineage.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Have you, what do you think of those two characters? Because I have to ask that now.
Well, I loved the book. I'm just going to leave it there. If you've read Kidnapped...
I have not, unfortunately.
Okay.
Meant to for years.
It's like a lot of Robert Louis Stevenson's novels, at least in my opinion, fun adventure. Very fun adventure.
Do you think that's part of why you've gotten into writing stories that have adventure as an element?
Well, not because of the name part. Because I've read Robert Louis Stevenson, yes. Alexander Dumas, oh God, yes. And most certainly Baroness Oaktree. And I know I just butchered that name. Please, anybody who's out there that loves her works and is a Nazi with the pronunciation, I apologize. I've never heard it pronounced correctly, so I mispronounced it.
If you had heard it pronounced correctly, would you know?
Yeah, I would try to. I think I would. But do you know what she wrote?
The Scarlet Pimpernel.
Yes.
I want to read that book. That's another one on my list.
Oh, and it's not just one book. It's an entire series.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
I love that character, though.
Yeah, Scarlet Pimpernel, the Legion of the Scarlet Pimpernel. There's a lot of them. And actually, A&E made some miniseries out of the novels.
Jane Seymour was in one of them that I saw. So I have this list of questions that I've been meaning to ask you, but it sounds like we're covering some of your literary heroes now, so...
And I apologize to everybody on the radio as I cough.
Not feeling well today.
Yeah. Who are my literary heroes, I guess is where we're going to go.
You've mentioned Stevenson and Dumas.
Stevenson, Dumas, most certainly. Charles W. Chestnut. And you're going to say, who the hell is he?
Yes, I am, but you said it for me.
Thank you. Charles W. Chestnut was an African-American writer during the Harlem Renaissance. And he actually, there's some speeches he wrote, including one that you could have called Martin Luther King style before Martin Luther King was, if he was born, and it's possible he was born when that was written, but he would have been a little baby or a little kid. Charles W. Chestnut wrote a lot about black culture and the insides of black culture or African American culture. I am not trying to be politically correct because
it's cool. They use different terms then too.
Right. But he wrote during the Harlem Renaissance. He could easily have passed as a white man. Mm-hmm. If you ever look at any pictures, you would swear he was. Mm-hmm. He refused to accept that.
Oh.
So he wrote about slavery. He wrote about the mulatto, like a better way to say this, mulatto situation where, oh, you're whiter than black, so thus you are in a better quote unquote class. I always found that interior aspect, especially into a world which I'm not a part of, and I can only see from the outside, seeing it coming from the inside, I found that extremely interesting. I will warn anybody who tries to read him, he is very difficult to read on the dialect, because he throws dialect into his dialogue. And it takes a little bit to get used to. It's really well done, beautifully done, but it's hard to get into until you're actually used to it, or if you've read other authors who do similar things and similar style of writing. Other literary heroes. I've mentioned him before, Earl Stanley Gardner. I think more because of the jealousy aspect of it. But he wrote Perry Mason, and he wrote under multiple pen names. At one time, he had the Guinness Book of World Records for the most books sold, with the exception of the Bible. The most books published. And even to this day, they say Perry Mason, people know who he is. Usually, so.
Wow, that I had no idea that there was that he was up there in that list of top 10s, you know, of best-selling books of all time.
Yeah, and he, like how he used to be. I've had my discipline broken. I'm doing a lot of repair in my life right now, but he always believed that you didn't need much sleep. You got up, you wrote, and I love how he also talked about how he considered your creativity or your mind to be like a horse. You tie it to a hitching post and you don't let it go anywhere, so that way it doesn't wander. You stay on focus. Other ones who I have absolutely loved, P.D. James. She just passed away very recently. May her soul rest in peace. She was the literary queen of crime over in England. She inherited Agatha Christie's title. Completely different type. Agatha Christie, I like. I wouldn't say I love her work, but I do like her work a lot. She was a whodunit. You could say P.D. James was as well, because the mystery was there. But P.D., or Phyllis Dorothy, dug more deeply into the psychological aspects of the crime and the sociological aspects. And what I mean by this is when crime occurs, usually it's not, oh my God, oh dear, crime occurred. Well, we've got our little tea party we must attend.
It's not a cozy.
It's not cozy at all. It is, okay, here's life that's been interrupted by a crime. Now let's add in the interruption of the cops who have got to find out who committed the crime and bring someone to justice. And you're dealing with all the psychological aspects of an entire community, microcosm, broken up by all these interruptions in their lives.
I'm noticing a theme in the adventure and the mystery and in the sociological aspects of writing and culture in your favorite authors. So what do you write then, and how do those feed into that?
Well, what I do write a lot of science fiction, so let me throw out my two other favorites real fast. Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov.
Big names.
Yeah. Asimov wrote not only science fiction, books on science, books on history, mystery, and so forth. He didn't believe in it being pigeonholed into a genre. I'm the same way. As far as I'm nowhere near as good as he is, so don't get me wrong when I say that.
The same philosophy, though.
The same philosophy. If it interests him, he wrote it. The other one, Arthur C. Clarke, I don't think I need to say anything with him except for hard science. Great man, is a great thinker. And when you throw those two into it, and then you talk about your question, it makes sense. I write a lot of science fiction. Even if it's space opera, it's hard science in that space opera. I write mystery. I write horror. There's a lot of horror out there I'm not exactly a fan of. So I think I write that more as a rebellion to what I see out there. And then I combine constantly. I've got a mystery science fiction series coming out. Actually, 2 that technically would be science fiction / crime drama.
Oh, wow. That sounds fun.
So, and I've got serials being published on my website. Yes, I'm the one who's publishing them.
Yay!
They are out there for free, and you don't need to go to Amazon, click anything like that. I I'm posting them on Tumblr, and by the time this airs, I'm going to also have them posted on my website in case people are reading them at lunch at work and can't go on Tumblr.
What's the link?
It is www.davidalanlucas.com. And when you go on my website, you'll see something at the top called Stories. Click there, and you'll see the ones that are out there and the ones that are coming. Also, too, this year or in the next year, I finally found some missing discs of old stories I wrote, some of which have been published. And so I'm going to look at those and maybe repost those.
Oh.
And when I say published, I mean by other publishers, not me doing it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, reprinting.
Exactly.
So, I'm surprised that you haven't mentioned martial arts. I'm really surprised. Actually, before this interview started, I mentioned that I needed a fork because we were at the weekly write-in. And David did not have a fork and thought I meant to stab him with one. And I said, no, I am pretty sure you could kill me whether or not I had a fork or a knife. Which is true. David is insanely good at martial arts. It's kind of a thing.
Thank you.
We know this about him. He's taught classes about it, like writing from a martial arts perspective and what is and is not realistic and how long fights actually last.
And whether or not you can have banter during those fights.
Note, not 10
really.
minutes and no.
No, not really. No, not unless you really have a break. Mm-hmm. Yes, I am a fourth degree black belt, or otherwise known as a Yodan. And I jokingly call it a Yoda. Yes, I am geeky like that. What can I say? I am a fourth degree black belt in what's called Chinese Kempo, otherwise known as Tracy's Kempo. It is a black art. What I mean by that is, while we do go to tournaments, at least with my studio, we go to tournaments, we win a lot of trophies, usually quite most of them. We study for the street first. I have competed in the past. I brought home trophies. I've almost triple crowned. What I mean by that is, in a tournament you have forms or kata. Mm-hmm. You have weapons kata, which is obviously kata with weapons. And you have sparring. And I've usually come first, second, third in those. And not necessarily in that order that I just mentioned the list.
Oh, could you explain what a kata is?
I call a kata to the layperson, I call it a kata is what floor exercise is to gymnastics. It is literally a presentation of choreographed strikes and moves, some of which are and not just in my style, all styles. A lot of them have existed longer than in the United States. Some I know go back good 600 plus years. Have they changed over time? Yes. If you've ever played the telephone game, that's the same way sometimes with the teaching of martial arts. One person teaches it to one person, they remember a certain way, then they go off and they teach it to someone else, and there's always a slight variation.
I never would have thought of katas as changing.
Yeah, they don't much, but I've seen, thanks to the invention of YouTube, where people of our sister style, American Kempo, and others of my style have posted. It's like, okay, that's not in my... Oh, I see what you're doing. Yes. No, we do it differently, but that's saying that what you just did doesn't work. It's rather nice, but...
As a reader and a watcher of media, having a thorough knowledge of fighting and how it works, in truth, I'm sure has made it difficult to watch certain things. But how has that changed you as a writer? And, does that cause problems for you when you want to write a giant epic fight scene and you're like, but that wouldn't happen?
Yes. Right off the bat, to all of the above. First off, to me, I find because of my expertise, writing fight scenes are even harder. Mm-hmm. Because, one, you're analyzing them a lot closer. Two, you're going to be called out for your BS. I mean, no offense, Kathleen, you don't have a background in fighting.
No, I don't.
So if you wrote a fight scene and someone's like, well, that can't happen, you're like, well, I got it as good as I could, as far as I got my information. I relied on other people, you're forgiven. If I do it, I will not be forgiven. And I should not be, to be honest. I mean, not to be mean to myself, but
I can research, but I can only research so far.
Right.
You do not need that research because you are it.
Partially. Actually, there are times in which I will sit down and have conversations with fellow black belts, and not just in my style, and because I don't believe I'm like Bruce Lee. Style can be limiting to you. Don't become a slave to it. I will talk to other styles and say, okay, here's a scenario. Let's talk it out. What do you think? Blah 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 blah, back and forth, and then I'll have the idea. That way, especially if I can't picture it right. Fortunate enough, though, I do have friends out there who are fellow experts. We can easily talk like that, and we are able to talk in a shorthand. So, because we know what we're talking about. And I have helped other writers improve their fight scenes or research their fight scenes when they've come to me and go, okay, can you do... Perfect example. Person was writing about a female character who's tied to a pole. She's about to be raped, and she somehow leans up, gets her legs around the guy's throat, and breaks his neck. Yes, but not the way she was trying to do it. And instead, I had her, after talking her through how things worked, I think she's working it out where the woman collapses the guy's windpipe by scissoring her legs.
Cool.
Yeah. Sorry again.
Dave is not feeling good. So, a question that I've asked other people, and you've been there for those, is what are pains of being a writer that you've run into that, I don't know, or maybe not things that people think about so much? Like, everybody thinks rejection, but what about the daily grind, and what about criticism from other people? Like, why are you a writer, and what keeps you going?
Why am I a writer? Because I'm insane. No, in all honesty, I actually tried to quit not because of choice necessarily, but because of what was going on in my life. As I said before, I'm rebuilding. And I can explain that in a moment. But during that time period, trying to find time to write, I know I've got a lot of writers going out there, well, you need to make time. Well, I was working roughly 80 hours a week. Ugh. Add to that I was also taking care of an elderly parent who was extremely sick at the time. If you want to know how sick, look up C. diff. Add to that, she could barely walk. In short, she had not had good medical health or not good medical advice, and basically ended up hurting herself and ended up with a broken leg, had to relearn how to walk. I can understand what it's like I don't have any kids, but I can understand what it's like for some people who have got babies, where you have to wake up every hour and a half, to change the diapers. Well, imagine you're doing that for an adult. And that was for several months on end.
On top of 80-hour work weeks.
Wow. So when I was talking about trying to find time to write, I wasn't kidding.
Did you use any of that time to sleep? Because
barely.
Oh my goodness.
Which is also why my current discipline with sleep and that has been broken. And I'm trying to repair it. And it sounds like it should be easy to do, but...
No, sleep is hard.
Yeah.
It's how your body helps regulate itself, and when that's off, your body is off.
Right. And I used to be able to sleep 4 to 5 hours a night and then get up and write in the morning before I went to work.
Oh, I've never been able to sleep that little. Oh!
So that's changed.
But you're getting back on the horse, it sounds like, now that you can. How are you doing that?
Very delicately. Really, right now, what I'm doing, my focus is building up readers. That's why I am throwing out these serials I'm talking about. And let me go and step back. Let me talk about before all this and then why I'm doing it now. Back in the day, I had a couple of offers from publishers to publish novels. One I walked away from because, let's just say, we had nothing hostile, just complete difference of opinion of how the story was supposed to go.
That's a big one.
Yeah, and I tried to rewrite it to what they were wanting. This was my first chance. Mm-hmm. And after a good 6 months of trying to do that, it's like, I've got to walk away. This is not...
It's not the story
It's not
writing.
the story, no. And the characters had changed so radically.
Oh.
Yeah. So, then I had a couple other chances, and what scared me away from that, and it was good that I did scare away from this, from a legal aspect, is my mom got sick right shortly thereafter.
Oh, wow.
And if I had signed a contract, I would have been easily in breach of contract before the first year.
Oh, wow.
So it's looking back like, yeah, that was a good... The opportunity was there, but the timing wasn't there.
Yeah.
So it was good that I did that. In the meantime, though, now that I'm back on the horse, the trick is building readership. If you go back to a Right Back Radio discussion not that long ago about gatekeepers, who are the gatekeepers, how do you get out there, and so forth. Well, it used to be, old days, you wrote short stories, you got published as short stories, that built some readership and built some attention, and then you could get novels. Well, that still exists, but not that well, or not that strong as it used to be. It's definitely a lot harder to get into, which is not a bad thing, but there's just fewer of them.
Yeah.
So,
There's definitely a wider audience with more access
right.
than there used to be.
So by doing this, I'm building readership. That's why I'm trying to get people to come. Just take a look, read, have fun. You know, yes, it's self-published. Yes, I'm trying to treat it just as if it was regular published with as much discipline. Number two, I've talked about in the past, I broke my voice. And that was before all this ever really happened, which was when I was working on my master's degree. And because of what my job was at the time, which all the pressure was going on, I developed what we'll call a legalese voice. And what I mean by that is, for my master's degree, it's in management. Okay, I had to write very formal. I'm also a paralegal. And with what I was doing, I was dealing with federal health care, and I'm not talking about Obamacare. I'm actually talking about the original Medicare. And I still work with dealing with Medicare on my bill pay job. And people, if you ever need to fall asleep, listen to a few Medicare calls with the government, I can guarantee you that will fix insomnia.
Did it swallow your writing voice?
It swallowed my writing voice.
Wow.
If you ever see me writing very formal, that's because I've gotten this
That
other
sounds
voice.
just horrifying. Like, I know that as writers, when you read certain authors, your writing can sound like them for a little while you're getting them out of your system. But the thought of having legalese, all of that clogging your writing voice, like,
Yeah.
that stuff is meant to be incomprehensible. Like, that's its job. Writing, the job is communication.
Right.
It's completely mutually exclusive.
Yeah, and, you know, it might sound like an excuse. Oh, well, because other people who write in the legal field can write fiction. Yes, most certainly. I just mentioned one I love earlier, Earl Stanley Gardner.
Yeah, but that's other people.
He's an attorney, right. For me, my voice got too formalized, and now I'm rediscovering it, which is the other reason why I'm writing all these serials, is I'm trying to get that voice back. I'm told with the very first one that's come out, which is Skittles.
That name cracks me up.
Yeah, it's meant to. If you haven't checked it out, it is a serial about a cat, written from the cat's point of view.
Oh my gosh.
Who is, if he's lucky, get to go to Mars on a one-way trip to colonize Mars. Because really, if we do colonize Mars, well, yay, I'm all behind it. But we are eventually going to want pets out there, and cats were used during World War I, World War II, and actually even back in the days of sail as mascots on ships because they kept the rats away from the food.
They are very helpful with them.
Yes, though they do have a certain attitude in which I try to capture.
So, I'd like to ask what advice you have for other writers.
Well, actually, this goes to part of your other question, which I didn't answer a moment ago. There's no path out there to your career. I kind of like Neil Gaiman's Gaiman. I know, I'm sorry.
No, they wrote a
mispronunciation.
poem. That's the only reason I know how to say it. Someone wrote a poem that was like lines and lines and lines long.
Gotcha.
Rhyming it so everyone would know. Sorry, Neil
That's
Gaiman
right.
said.
Neil Gaiman was talking about how he didn't have a path. He didn't have a career path when he started writing. He just had a list of to-dos. I like that idea. I don't have such a list, but something like that is very appropriate because there's no career roads. You don't find satisfying careers on the side of a road that someone else has already paved. At least I don't. You gotta go blaze your own path. And it's not going to be easy. You're going to go through the brambles. You're going to fall over logs, trip over the rocks.
Go through 80-hour work weeks and have absolutely no time for like a period of...
There's that too. But as my grandmother, my step-grandmother, the one who I mentioned was literary, she had passed away before I was ever born. My grandfather remarried, and my step-grandmother had given my dad a plaque that I stole. Admittedly stole it, didn't know it was for her until after she passed away. And I hung it up in my office when I was a kid. I had a writing office when I was a kid. Typewriter at first, manual typewriter, and then eventually went all the way up to the word processors when they came out. Yes, I feel old now that I'm talking about that.
No, that was my favorite toy when I was little.
And I hung this up. I was having a lot of trouble with school. A lot of trouble, period. Where I seemed to believe only in myself and no one else believed in me.
Mm-hmm.
And the little sign, and you've heard me say this, the audience probably has as well, but I'm going to say it again. And I kept this right above my typewriter and said, quote, "Don't worry if you work hard and your rewards are few. Remember, the mighty oak was once a nut like you."
I love that quote. That you have said it before. I love that one.
And I say that to all my fellow writers out there. I don't care how hard the path is, you can get there. Keep at it.
I think that is a brilliant note to end on. Thank you for letting me interview you.
Well, thank you.
And thank you everyone for listening. This has been an interview of the head of Right Pack Radio.
And join us next week for yet another interesting adventure in the writing industry. Thank you. The Right Pack would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their bookstore. STL Books and Gifts is St. Louis's newest independent bookstore with an emphasis on fine literature for adults and children and the most comprehensive selection of St. Louis books available anywhere. Visit them online at stlbooks.com or in person at 100 West Jefferson Avenue, Kirkwood, Missouri 63122. Tune in next week as the Right Pack will conquer yet another pondering issue in the writing industry. Theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.